Hello everyone and welcome to Nighthawks. Today we will be talking about Ari Aster's debut film starring Toni Collette, Alex Wolff, Millie Shapiro, and Gabriel Byrne, Hereditary. Right off the bat, let's give some background of the film's conception before diving deep into the plot summary and an analysis. In today's episode, it's pretty special. I have a guest from the Hereditary subreddit on Reddit. I just wanted to have some variety and have her on the show, so make sure to stick around if you want to hear that. First, we should talk about the writer and director, Ari Aster. He wrote and directed 2 short films before garnering the attention of A24. The Strange Thing About the Johnsons and Munchausen are both films about families with secrets and grief. Even now, we see some similarities with H.P. Lovecraft from our last episode. The two mainly write about families hiding horrible secrets behind their home walls. The Strange Thing About the Johnsons chronicles Sidney Johnson, an African-American father who is molested by his son on regular occasions after walking in on him masturbating when he was a young boy. While making the film for his American Film Institute thesis and following film festivals in 2011, he focused on subjects that were seen as taboo, borderline unmentionable, and unfathomable, and so the concept of a son molesting his father was conceived. Munchausen follows the story of a boy who begins to pack his belongings for college. His mother, however, has a different plan and instead makes him sick until his son inevitably dies. She does this in fear of being left out of his life. And as I watched these 2 films, watching the secrets of the Johnsons being burned in the fireplace, and as the mother cried for the son that she had killed with her own 2 hands, it became clear that Ari Aster had begun his journey in cataloging and understanding how families have skeletons in their closets, demons in their minds, and burdens to set ablaze. When Aster pitched the film to A24, it was described as a family tragedy that curdles into a nightmare, and was deliberate in not calling it a horror film. However, he described the film as 2 halves completely inextricable from each other. These themes of a broken family at its core and a nightmarish horror film seem to be one and the same, and are presented in that fashion as well. The plot of Hereditary is as follows. Annie Graham is a miniatures artist who lives in Utah with her husband, Steve, their 16-year-old son, Peter, and their eccentric and reserved 13-year-old daughter, Charlie. At the funeral of her secretive mother, Ellen Lay, Annie delivers a eulogy explaining their fraught relationship and her mother's extremely private life. A week later, Steve is informed that Ellen's grave had been desecrated, while Annie thinks that she sees an apparition of Ellen in her workshop. At a support group for the bereaved, Annie reveals that the rest of her family suffered from mental illness that resulted in their deaths, and how Ellen was a significant figure in raising Charlie. To attend a party, Peter lies that he is going to a school event, and Annie forces him to take Charlie with him. Unsupervised, Charlie eats cake containing nuts, which he is allergic to, and falls into anaphylactic shock. As Peter drives her to the hospital, Charlie leans out of the window for air. Peter swerves to avoid a dead deer, and Charlie is decapitated by a telephone pole. In shock, Peter silently drives home and leaves his sister's headless corpse in the car for her mother to discover the next morning. The family grieves following Charlie's funeral, heightening tensions between Annie and Peter, and causing Annie to behave cowardly towards Steve. Peter is plagued by Charlie's presence around the house. Annie is befriended by a support group member, Joan. Annie tells her that she used to sleepwalk and recounts an incident in which she woke up in Peter's bedroom to find herself, Peter, and Charlie covered in paint thinner with a lit match in her hand. Joan teaches Annie to perform a seance to communicate with Charlie. Annie convinces her family to attempt a seance. Objects begin to move and break, terrifying Peter, and Charlie seemingly possesses Annie until Steve douses her with water. Annie suspects that Charlie's spirit has become malevolent. She throws Charlie's sketchbook into a fireplace, but her sleeve also begins to burn. She retrieves it and heads to Joan's apartment for advice, but Joan is nowhere to be found. Annie notices that Joan's welcome mat resembles her mother's craft work. She goes through her mother's possessions and finds a photo album linking Joan to Ellen and a book with information about a demon named Payman, who wishes to inhabit the body of a male host. In the attic, Annie finds Ellen's decapitated body with a strange symbol on a wall written in blood. At school, Peter inexplicably slams his head against his desk, breaking his nose, and is brought home. Annie shows Steve her mother's body and the sketchbook. Annie then begs Steve to burn the sketchbook so that she can sacrifice herself to stop the haunting. But Steve assumes that she has gone mad, accusing her of desecrating Ellen's grave herself. When Annie throws the book into a fireplace, Steve bursts into flames and dies. An ethereal light goes into a horrid Annie, possessing her. Peter awakens to find his father's body. A possessed Annie then chases him into the attic, which is decorated with occult imagery. Levitating Annie beheads herself with a clay wire as naked coven members look on. In fright, Peter jumps out of the window and falls to the ground outside. The light soon enters Peter's body, and he wakes up. He follows Annie's levitating corpse into Charlie's treehouse, where Charlie's crowned, severed head rests atop a mannequin. Joan, the other coven members, and the headless corpse of Peter's mother and grandmother bow to him. Joan, addressing Peter as Charlie, swears an oath to him as Payman, stating that he has been liberated from his female host and is free to rule over them. The coven members bow to Payman in the treehouse, resembling one of Annie's miniature replicas. I am joined with Ashley. She is someone I met on the internet. That simple. But she has some pretty great interest in the movie Hereditary, and I thought that I wanted some variety in the show, and I wanted some other opinions. So, yeah, here's Ashley. Can you introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah, I really like Hereditary. The first time that I saw it, I really did not like it, and then I watched it again, and I started to understand what it means a lot more. It is obviously a very deep film. It's not like a typical horror movie. The biggest thing for me is that it does not have any jump scares in it, and it's a very deep film. So yeah, let's talk about that.
Did you have the privilege of watching it in the movie theater, or did you watch it after?
Yes, the first time I watched it, I was in the theater.
Oh.
It was very nice.
Yeah, sadly I couldn't, I wasn't able to do that, but I do own it on DVD, so I am at least happy on that. Yeah, I think my direct response after watching it was like, I need to buy it. I need to just have it for myself. But yeah,
The first time I watched it with my sister,
Mhm.
and she hated it. And I think the biggest thing that turns people off that aren't able to look into it in a deeper light is its length. Let me look up how long it is, because I know it's a very long movie.
Yeah, I think it just passes 2 hours, I think.
Yeah, it's 2 hours and 7 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Most horror movies are like only an hour and 20 minutes. Yeah, like the Blair Witch Project. Have you seen that movie?
Yeah, of course, it's a classic.
Okay, yeah. Like that movie, it's a classic horror movie, and that movie's only an hour and 40 minutes.
Really?
It's able to like keep you engaged
Mm-hmm.
for like better for a first time viewer, I think. Like 2 hours, that's like the standard for like maybe a longer, like more in-depth movie, like Interstellar, that type of movie, like a docudrama can be longer.
Yeah, that was definitely, yeah.
It's kind of hard for a horror movie to be that long. But this movie, I think, if you're able to read into it and understand what it's trying to say, it is still a good movie for like.
Let's just kind of dive deep into kind of like an analysis of it. So on this podcast, we mainly just dive into the question: what makes a particular medium scary? What makes it horrifying? What makes it kind of just creep under your skin? And I know that this film, like you said, it isn't just a regular horror movie. It definitely has it's a lot more deeper than that. It isn't just a surface level cliche horror film. It tackles a lot of different kinds of subjects. So before I get into mine, I wanted to know what themes did you see in the movie that were very prevalent?
In terms of the movie itself, I felt like the movie itself was talking about, like you said before, grief, family issues, but the emotion that I felt while watching it, and the thing that scared me, was the anxiety of the film.
Really?
I believe, like, later in the movie when, kind of when the whole, I mean, spoilers obviously, but kind of when the whole house has gone to shit, and Peter is the only one left that is, like, not gone insane.
Yeah.
Or not possessed, I guess. There's the part where he wakes up and the mom is, like, sitting in the corner of the room on the ceiling. And that part, the camera kind of pans out and it just holds it there for a few seconds, when a normal horror movie would have just done a jump scare right there.
Yeah.
And the whole movie has so much tension built up. And yeah, I think that part of the movie is very, very well.
Yeah, I think it definitely, it's a lot more subtle. It isn't as in your face. It's more of a kind of creeping feeling, like how you described it, kind of like just kind of anxious.
I think a main thing that the movie suffers from for normal viewers is it doesn't do a very good job of kind of explaining what it's about. I had no idea what the movie was actually about the first time I watched it. If you're not really able to tell, it's about the cult that the grandmother is the leader of. But at the beginning of the movie, you can see when they're at the grandma's funeral, Toni Collette, the main character, says that she sees a lot of people that she doesn't know, and this is obviously the cult. When Peter is driving the daughter home for fears of her allergic reaction, on the post that she hits her head on, the cult symbol is there. Yeah. So I think that if you watch the movie, you would definitely have to be looking out for things like that to get your full enjoyment out of it, and to get the sense of dread and the long setup that the movie has. Because without that, I think you're going to be lost.
Yeah. Speaking on the whole the cult kind of being a whole part of this, I also wanted to touch on the theme that it has on free will. I think that it's definitely touched upon, and if anything, it's kind of the whole kind of thesis at the very end of the film is this movie any more or less tragic, knowing that their actions may or may not have just been not theirs at all? It might have just been completely under the control of the cult, or maybe they actually just kind of fell into the hands of the cult rather than them just not having control over that. And I feel like on this podcast we talk a lot about that loss of control, or feeling that you just don't have control over your own emotions or your own actions. I feel like this film definitely does get into that a little bit.
Yeah, I think the film does a really good job of that feeling. I kind of think that they do have free will, but the cult obviously set up things to be in the way. Like, the cult placed the dead deer in the road so that Peter would swerve and hit the post. The cult was the one that supplied the peanuts at the party so that she would have the allergic reaction.
I mean, of course, the whole thing is the grandmother dying and how they're very distant from her, and so they don't really feel that kind of shockwave of grief, or that shockwave that usually goes through a family after a loss. But I feel like in this movie, basically the whole rest of the movie is that quote-unquote like shockwave that happens after the grandma's death with the cult. Her influence that she used to have when she was alive is, if not controlling their lives after her death.
Oh yeah, I believe the main character, Toni Collette, even mentions that their grandmother is dead and she's still controlling their lives. And
yeah, I feel like sometimes it is like that though. One of the themes they talk about, like you had brought up, was grief, and I think one of the biggest parts of kind of going through grief is feeling like it does take over your daily life. I'm not sure, it's a pretty common feeling towards everyone is that they at least feel grief once or twice, whether it be kind of like a shallow grief that they have like for the grandma, or a really deep grief to the point where she was keening for Charlie. It was like there's such a range of how that grief affects your life. And I feel like this movie, of course, talks about how grief can pretty much have a death grip on someone's life.
Yeah, I think that's very true. It is kind of felt like very little with when the grandmother's initial death. Like Toni Collette talks about, not feeling normal, but feeling normal, feeling like she's supposed to feel something.
Yeah.
But she can't. When Charlie's death happens, that when she feels a loss of control from her life, and not being able to handle anything anymore. She even gets to the point where the character that introduces her into summoning the demon Payman, or Louis, Louis.
Yeah.
The grief that is caused by Charlie's death, and her not being able to live her normal life, not being able to use her escape of making the miniatures, like we see in the movie. Toni Collette is making their daughter into a miniature when she died, because that's how she copes with things. And she runs out of art supplies, so she gets to go get more because she needs that to grieve. And then that's how she runs into Joan, and then that kind of kicks off the events of the possession part of the movie.
I never even noticed that. That's actually, wow. All right, wow. That's I didn't even pick up on that. That puts a lot of things into a different kind of perspective there.
Yeah, like I said, this movie is very, very deep, which is probably why I didn't like it so much. Because when I saw it originally, I was expecting like a scary movie. But
Yeah.
I mean, this movie it has a few scenes that like actually give me shivers. But I think it's more of a thriller than a scary movie.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's obviously still horror.
I think my initial response while watching it, I knew it was like a scary, kind of very eerie movie, and knowing, kind of watching a bunch of other A24 films, kind of watching it, assuming that it was going to be something that I knew was going to affect me. It wasn't until the half-hour mark, when Charlie's head gets brutally decapitated by a pole, that my view of the whole movie completely changed, and for the rest of like the hour and a half, I had no idea what direction the film was gonna go in.
Yeah, and I want to go back to talking about the horror in the movie and how it's not very present. A few scenes that come to mind that like directly scared me was when Peter was in the attic and you heard the banging on it, and you think it's her gonna be on the ladder, but it's her attached to the ceiling, banging her head in on the attic stairwell door.
Yeah.
And that really shocks you. Also, when Peter's mom, Toni Collette, is hanging from the attic, and she starts using a clay cutter to cut her neck and decapitate herself. That's another really good horror scene in the movie. And that scene actually directs to the ending of the movie, where they have to decapitate the host for payment to possess it.
Yeah, I another thing that I didn't notice until I'd read it was the crown that they give Peter, I guess Payman at the end, was actually made from Charlie's body's skin. I didn't even know that, and just kind of imagining this whole family. I mean, they all kind of have this big role in the treehouse. There's the grandma and then Annie, both decapitated. So I feel like that is also a visualization of the fear that Annie had, which was kind of becoming like her mother. She didn't want that. She very much distanced herself from her mom, even from the family. But at the end of the story, she basically became the biggest help in getting them what they wanted.
The movie definitely it's a very abrupt ending. And the ending part of the movie is it's Peter waking up, getting chased out the house, and then he kills himself, and he's possessed, and then the movie ends. It's very abrupt. It's not like, I think it's an issue of the Blair Witch is that 40 minutes of the movie is them staring at a camera going, oh, I'm so scared, when Hereditary is able to do all that in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And that entire scene, when he's going through the house, is filled with a lot of really good horror scenes that are just pure creepiness. Like when the naked cult members are just sitting in the shadows, you can barely see them, and they're just sitting there watching Peter. And he can't do anything about it, and they know his fate, but he doesn't. He's just so scared and terrified, and he's just trying to survive, but they know what's going to happen to him. And you expect that. That's also another message of the movie, is that how Charlie, the daughter, was the firstborn, and they needed a male body to possess.
Yeah.
And then they had the son, Peter,
Mm-hmm.
and that also is reflected in the movie, where the whole movie are with the female main character, and then at the end it switches to the male character, because that's what Paimon needs to possess, is the male body.
Yeah.
But it does a very good job of being different, because in most horror movies, either everybody dies at once or one character makes it out alive. And this movie does a very good job of making you think that Peter is about to live, but he does not. I think the biggest way that grief transforms the movie is just the surprisals of it. With, like you said, I think Charlie's death is just completely unexpected.
Oh, yeah.
Unfortunately, I was spoiled on that when I first saw the movie. But I imagine someone that hadn't seen the movie before and was just watching. You think they're going to be going to the hospital to get a shot or something, or to get helped, but she's just killed when she is presented as the main character of the movie previously.
Oh, yeah.
And that just really changes what you're thinking and how the movie was going to be, how the movie is shown to you. And I want to branch off into another topic. The music in that scene is really good.
Yes,
I think the music throughout the whole movie is really good. An issue that a lot of horror movies fall into is having the music orchestrate the entire scare. I don't know if you're into video games, but there's a scary game called Outlast, and in that game, when you get grabbed by the creatures or whatever, it plays an extremely loud string of music, and if you take that away, it's not scary at all. And Hereditary does not really fall into that issue. Its music more of assists the scene and doesn't direct it. It's not like loud blaring music. It's low, long strings that terrify you and make you feel the presence of the spirits. The last shot of the movie by the treehouse, the music in that scene is just beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
It really does complement the atmosphere of the movie.
Very much iconic at this point, I think. Are you familiar with Colin Stetson? He's the guy that does the music in it.
With his other music? Hereditary, Blue Caprice. I'm trying to see, because I'm very into movie scores. So
no, you're fine.
Oh, yeah, he's in Red Dead.
Yeah.
He's Red Dead 2. Yeah. Oh, now that I think about it, yeah, I could definitely tell that.
Yeah. I've been a fan of his for a while, until when I saw the movie, it wasn't until the credits when I saw his name when I realized that it was him doing the music, and I kind of appreciated the film so much more. But what's interesting about him and how he writes his music is he's mainly just a saxophonist. He mainly only plays saxophone, and a lot of like the quote-unquote drum beats that you hear in the soundtrack is just the saxophone valves just opening and closing over and over and over again.
Oh, yeah, he also did Mother, which was a very interesting horror movie.
That's actually on my watch list. I did not know he made the soundtrack for that. Wow.
Yeah. It says he's credited in it. It doesn't. I don't know if it's full. So
Okay.
Man, really off topic, but
No, you're fine.
I just cannot stand that movie. It is so over the top for me.
Really?
I think Hereditary does a much better job of having a
more subtle,
a larger message than that one does.
Really? Okay, interesting. I'll definitely...
back on the topic with the music of Hereditary. It's very, very good at assisting the scenes and helping you understand what's going on in the movie and when it's happening. Like when Peter is getting stalked through the house at the end of the movie. I could be dead wrong, but I don't think there's any music there. And so it goes from a scary,
silence,
zoomed in, scary experience with no music, just him trying to survive. And then the final score of the movie, which is those long strings of just really good, tense music.
Oh, yeah.
And just the music in this film is just really good. I actually listened to it. The soundtrack, I just listened to it casually.
Yeah, same.
And it really, every time you listen to it, it brings you back into the movie, and it gives you the tense and anxiety of the film.
Yeah.
And so I think it definitely, the music in this movie definitely helps out a lot.
Oh, yeah. I definitely think that if it's one of those films that if the music was removed from it, it would very, like how you said, it would be very much a different film atmospherically. Like the music is, especially in the end, it's very majestic, very royal.
Oh
Kind of.
yeah, it's very like royal and
Uh-huh.
heavenly, and I mean, it feels like a cult is summoning a demon. That's what it
Yeah,
feels like.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Have you ever seen John
mhm.
Carpenter's The Thing?
Oh yes. Oh my God, that is
Yeah, the
it's a
music
great
in
one.
that movie also feels very similar, where it's like got this
Hmm.
deep, uncoming atmosphere of like anxiety and horror.
Hmm.
Like in the beginning of the movie The Thing, it's just got those dun dun. It's just got
Yeah.
that, which is to symbolize a heartbeat of
Hmm.
the thing being alive.
Yeah.
And I think that relates to Hereditary, how at the end
Hmm.
it's just this royal, like you said, royal
Yeah.
heavenly music
Hmm.
that just symbolizes that the task that the cult has been trying to complete is now finally done.
Yeah.
And
It's almost like
yeah,
it's. When I hear heavenly, I always think of angels, and when I always think of angels, I always think of Lovecraft. I always think of just these very undescribably, hauntingly beautiful things, and I think that's the best way to describe this music. Is just,
oh, hauntingly beautiful is a
yeah.
great way to describe it.
Oh yeah.
You're right. It is very
Mhm.
hard to describe it, but it is hauntingly beautiful. Because if I was in my car and I heard that on the radio, I'd be like, "What the hell is that?"
Yeah.
But it is very, very good at just being
Hmm.
like, "Wow, what is this?" It is good
It is something else.
at
Yeah.
orchestrating the feeling you're supposed to be feeling and
Yeah.
having a haunting tone yet still sounding so great and
Hmm.
beautiful. That's my favorite part about the Hereditary soundtrack is
Hmm.
it's scary, but it's not just loud bangs and music. It's actual music and it's an actual orchestra.
Hmm.
And yeah,
I feel like it's also very unique to the film. I don't think any film will really have that sound in it. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like,
I am.
uh-huh.
I think that's part of why revisiting this film I enjoy it so much is the score.
Yeah.
I'm a very big movie nerd. I love analyzing movies, and one of
Hmm.
my favorite things to do is analyze the music in them.
Hmm.
Because I feel like a lot of
Really?
normal people don't even really acknowledge the music that's happening.
Yeah.
Um, like you said, you've seen Interstellar, right?
Oh, yes. I love the soundtrack to Interstellar. I love it.
So when they're on the water planet and you hear the ticking,
Hmm.
that ticking is actually a day passing on Earth.
Oh, really?
So that like you don't even realize it, but that ticking gives a feeling of anxiety
Oh,
because
yeah.
it does sound like a counter, so you know like something's about to happen.
Yeah. Like, and you also
And
know it's like this is a very time sensitive planet, so every second that passes,
yeah,
yeah.
tension's a really good way to describe it, and the
Hmm.
Hereditary soundtrack definitely has tension.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
then
that is a
I,
very big part of the
mhm.
soundtrack is tension.
I think a part of the soundtrack as well, like kind of in the end, is that kind of very kind of royal, like very slow kind of clarinets, saxophones coming in. It's very slow, but it still builds that tension, and I feel like it's a very difficult task to do, and I feel like they did that so well. Where it's such a short scene, and with such a short song, somehow rose the tension from almost like a 100 and then went to 200.
I think the part that's most interesting is that scene at the end. I want to hear your guess. How long do you think that scene is at the end with that music, with that royal music you said?
I think it's like 5 minutes at least, like of the whole movie.
5 minutes?
Yeah.
Here's the thing. It's 55 seconds, but it
Really?
feels so
Oh
long
my
because
God.
of how haunting and creepy the music is.
Wow.
And it's able to do all that emotion within 55 seconds. It's great.
That's insane. That is really insane. Well, I definitely give the filmmakers prop. I could definitely tell that this is a movie that was made with so much care and so much precision. Mhm.
Earlier in the podcast, you brought up A24 films. Is this an A24 film?
Yes, actually, yeah.
Or I didn't know that. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I've tried watching other movies. I tried to watch The Lighthouse, and while I was able to appreciate it, it just kind of went right over my head. I didn't really get it.
Really?
But this movie is definitely way better at doing. giving a message.
Yeah, I think The Lighthouse is more of kind of a. I mean, from what I've heard from reviews, I haven't seen it yet. It is on my watch list, and I really do want to watch it. It's been on my watch list for like forever, but from what I've heard, it's almost like its own genre without being too much of a horror or too much of a, because there's a lot of comedic
I mean,
and
The
stuff.
Lighthouse is definitely not a horror movie.
Yeah.
It's a dark thriller.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I think that's something that somebody might not pick up on their first viewing. I definitely did it, but just how important the aspects of family are and how much the family impacts the movie. I don't know how I saw it, given that the title is even called Hereditary, which is a family-based word.
Yeah.
But yeah, the feelings of family is very strong here.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, you don't really get a feeling of who the main character is, and that's because there really isn't one.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody is like focused on, and they all have their own plot.
Mm-hmm.
The only character I'd say that isn't directly involved is the dad, and that is because he is not hereditary. He is outside of the family.
Oh yeah.
While the two children are born from the mother, but he has no blood relation to Nicolette and the grandmother.
Yeah, that is true. I like that.
Overall, I just think that this is a really good movie that anyone that is able to look at movies into a deeper sense can enjoy. And I would. Here's how I think you should watch it. I think you should watch it once, and then go watch an analysis of it, or read an analysis of it, and kind of have it explain things to you.
Yeah.
And then watch it again, and you'll start to notice those things, and notice more things, and you'll appreciate it way more. That's what I did. Like I said, the first time I watched it, I did not like it. I went home, I watched YouTube videos on it, and like kind of explaining things I didn't see. And yeah, it turned into my my favorite movie of 2018. Oh, an overall just good movie. And if I don't know why you'd be listening to this if you haven't finished the movie, or if you haven't seen the movie, but if you're listening to this now and you have not watched it, you need to go watch it. It is very good.
Yeah, very much so. I think that it's the same here. It's a movie that I feel like is very personal to anyone. Maybe not the first, but maybe the second or the third time they watch it. I feel like the more they watch it, the more they not only appreciate the film, but also some parts that they might not have thought were scary kind of show their true colors and kind of also become a lot more scarier because they're paying attention to stuff like the music, or because they're paying attention to the stuff like how the shots are made, or the acting in particular, and the writing. I think it's a movie with lots and lots of layers, and I think as his first theatrical debuts, oh my god, it was what I think horror should aspire to be.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think that this is a good example of how to make a horror movie and how to make it be not boring, I guess. Like, if you didn't know this, like, horror is the budget genre. It's the genre that, like, cheap movies get made in because they typically do well. They can typically be low for, like, low budget. Like, that's how Paranormal blew up. Paranormal Activity blew up. It was made for, like, $30.
Yeah.
And pulled in millions. And then that sparked this whole thing of making cheap horror movies. And A24 does that really well. The Lighthouse had a low budget. I mentioned Hereditary was pretty big. It seems like it would be.
Yeah, it seemed a little bigger, I think.
But yeah, this movie definitely stands out from horror. If you're one of those people, there's a lot of people who just straight up don't watch horror movies, whether it be they don't enjoy it or they get scared. I think that you need to watch this. It's not like other horror movies. It's worth it. If you haven't seen it and you like deeper films, then go watch it. That's all I can say. I can't say any more without spoiling it, which we already have.
Yeah.
But if you skip to the end to just hear like our closing thoughts, then yeah, just go watch the movie.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. Have a good night. Films are reflections of real life. And I think that if you watch a horror movie and realize that the people you are watching are much like yourself, you would feel uneasy. There's that intimacy broken there. The keening of Annie might remind you of your mother's death, the death of your own daughter. Peter standing idly by might haunt you because you stood there and did nothing while your mother cried in her room, screaming about how she just wants to die. You might feel like Steve, waiting until everything goes away, wanting everything to resolve itself, hoping that your fears go away, but they don't, and they won't. They'll kill you instead. I think that this film effortlessly shows the underbelly of our family that we're afraid to discuss and talk about, as the rest of his filmography will show and has shown over the past few years. As long as Ari Aster keeps touching those subjects that make us uncomfortable and shed them in a human light, he will continue to be a Goliath in the film industry. Now, the discussion is not over yet. Make sure to listen to part 2 next week right here. We will be discussing Midsommar and connecting the two films. That was my analysis on the themes of Hereditary and why it is such a terrifying movie. If you like this episode of Nighthawks, make sure to follow us on Spotify and to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Good night, Nighthawks, and make sure you read something that'll keep you up at night.